I would like to thank, good morning everyone, first of all. Also to those who are watching us online. Today we are going to start the session, the plenary session, with banking, finance and insurance for health and well-being technology innovation. The chair will be the Dean of MIB, Trieste School of Management, Professor Andrea Tracogna, and his co-chair is Ms. Roberta Terpin, Senior Investment Officer Friulia in Trieste, Italy. This is an important session, the final plenary session on research for innovation, healthcare, then education for training for education. This is finance, and then we're going to have policy for innovation. This is important because development of companies and startups is done through finance. Let's have what happens in the biotech field. You have the floor, please. What would you prefer, Italian or English? Thank you, Mr. Brava, for this invitation, which is very welcome. The session is truly interesting for those like me who works for managing and entrepreneurial training. I would like to tell you a few words of how I see this session and how I can bring new elements of interest. Mr. Brava quoted the important role of finance in transforming ideas for companies in solutions, goods and services to bring to citizens and to the market. The market is the mechanism that more than others, at least in Western context, selects the goods and services that will be part of the daily use of society. So the market is a sophisticated selecting device that works according to few rules. I come from academia, from the University of Trieste, and many research projects, especially basic research, are brought forward for the advancement of knowledge. So my question is here, how do we create this spell so as to have knowledge, basic knowledge that can be transformed into something that everybody can enjoy? It's quite a long path. It can take years, can be unsuccessful. It's an activity that needs enormous resources at human and financial level. And because the market selects, cannot be guaranteed by public intervention. When we go from applied science or development and products launched on the market, we need to think about new support forms. And this is where finance comes along. The title of the session gives us an idea about the stakeholders who can help: banks, insurance companies as investments, but also other stakeholders which are presented here in the list of speakers for this session. Obviously, these stakeholders that we will mention shortly, private equity, crowdfunding, and so on, just as activities from institutions which work in investments, have each their characteristics and special features. So the meeting between innovation, that maybe is in the mind of a scientist that doesn't think in terms of innovation, but thinks about patents and research and publications. These stakeholders must be carefully examined, thinking about who are these stakeholders, and I believe this morning's meeting is interesting from this point of view. I would like to listen what will be said here, because as I am the scientific director for a management school and as I work in research in the company field, I believe that I am sort of a bridge between academia and finance and markets. We'll see that some of the initiatives that have been presented here at Venture Factory, for example, are involving us, and this can show us how the system for high education can play its part. The challenge is ambitious, especially in contexts such as these: health, well-being, biomed, biotech, which have different profiles. If they are not rocket science, they're getting close to being such. We are talking about innovation projects in the borderline that are interesting to consider in an Italian context, because we cannot expect the solutions to come from the Anglo-Saxon world or from other Western countries. So it's high time we started to put in our effort. Of course, this is an international conference, so we're trying to become a team to see how we can start collaboration on these fields. Maybe I spoke a bit too much. I would like to give the floor to the first speaker. We're going to, we not to be brief. We need to bear witness, not to speak about everything in the world of finance for innovation. So I would give the floor to Michele Morganti, who will speak on behalf of Generali Investments Europe. We have his position in the schedule, which describes the reason why he is here with us as a speaker, because he deals with investments activities in a great corporation, in a high-tech sector. So, Michele Morganti, you have the floor. I'm going to ask all the speakers to not go beyond the 10-minute time limit. Good morning, everyone. I don't know if you can hear me. My speech will be on what do we see in insurance field and investment field in medtech pharma sectors, where biotech is an important part from the part of innovation. As insurance, we don't only have the investment side of things in terms of tech in pharma, but we also have an insurance part, because if we want to grow in the health sector through the development of the technology, indirectly we favor investments in the sector, so on the investment side but also insurance side. The slide that I put now while I was speaking wants to show you that how on the investment side, this is the FTSE Italian Star, which is FTSE MIB is 150, where FTSE here shows. Let's have the slide, please. We can't see it. I think you can all see it now. Okay, you can see it now. So you see the black line where Italy is 100 compared to MIB 150. Mid-cap is 250. That means that an investment in the real economy, in the small, innovative companies, is worthwhile. Changes nowadays that are happening should free something for equity investments, and we could have some fiscal facilities to help small companies on the debt side. And as you see, this bears fruit as profitability, which is justified by better profits. The sector that is growing after COVID has seen an acceleration as protection and healthcare in general on the part of clients, insurance clients, with a digital acceleration on technological innovation, which transforms indirectly in investments. So we have tech, biotech, which have had a very favorable moment with insurers and the asset managers. Insurers have redesigned their products to match the technology interaction taking place. Clearly, the investment in this sector is promising. In terms of ESG ranking, from the point of view of quality and environmental protection, the sector has improved, has become more attractive, and this will favor further investments. The consumers have reconsidered their needs. We must be covered from a health point of view, because the expenses which are not covered by insurance are 3% of the costs in developing countries, so there's increasing need to be covered. This corresponds to technical innovations from insurance. Surveys say that on the first place on the client's wishes, private health insurance, which overcomes life. The health premiums are increasing and will continue to increase in the next 5 years. As I was saying, this percentage that must be covered in insurance is quite high. Italians ask for long-term care. In as far as venture funding of digital health, we have 14.6 billion, which is highly accelerating compared to previous years. And telehealth starts with an 11% interest, now it's 76%. So it's an incredible growth in 1 year. The IPOs, which is another form of gathering initiatives, tech, insurance, which are connected to health, reach almost 4 billion in 2020, with a strong increase compared to previous years. Generali and other insurers have digital platforms, integration and support for clients from a point of view of health. And operations within the group are ever more efficient and technological. To have smart automation and customer care. From a point of view of investments, if we correct returns and we obtain sharp ratio in the sector, in Europe has a 0.7, and from a profit point of view, there's no comparison. In the healthcare, it's the best. Equipment and supplies, so machinery for healthcare with high technological innovation, have a good return, which is doubling each year in the past 20 years. Not only, but if we could, at 16 episodes of breakdown, we see that the healthcare sector is definitely acting better than the market as a whole. So we have on average 13% compared to 20% in the market, and the maximum drawdown 24% in pharma compared to 41% in the market. It's not only media that offers good returns, but even in difficult moments in the market, this sector is going very well. The risk profile is very good for those who want to invest, both in small companies but also listed large companies. From sector valuation, healthcare in Europe is aligned to the market. It's not a problem, so it's somehow interesting. But not only, if we are to see these sectors in the world that behave better from the point of view sharp ratio, and they are not connected to Europe and help diversify, 25% of these sectors belong to pharma in it as a whole. If we are to look for sectors that are better from the point of view of diversification and profitability in the past 20 years, so to limit the volatility of profitability, you see that for a quarter we are in the pharma field. Last element, and I will conclude. If we compare 2020-2021, the companies that have been quoted in the ESG have improved in a year enormously. So this is become a very important element for profitability. So the fact that it has become more attractive from the ESG makes it more attractive for investments. And then we have the long term of the aging population. So for long-term investments, the fact that we are in front of connected to the aging population, that means a growth bigger than the GDP, and the fact that has an attractiveness in terms of ESG, the sector will continue to be attractive. And in Italy, we expect some reforms to support small companies. Thank you for your interesting presentation and the fact that you respected the deadline. This signal of appreciation from institutional investors such as Generali, and we're talking about established companies, maybe small SMEs, but investments are carried out in the stock market and listed companies. There are some projects that come before the setting up of these companies. So it will be interesting to look at the world of crowdfunding. And I'm going to invite Giancarlo Vergine to tell us what was his experience, especially regarding the sectors of healthcare, biotech, medical, and so on. Please, you have the floor. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Engineer Brava for the invitation to this event, which we consider to be quite important for our activity, and see how equity crowdfunding works, that I will about to explain and describe compared to what is the world of innovation, biotech and bio-high-tech. I will start with who we are to then tell you what we do and how we work. CrowdFundMe is one of the main platforms for crowdfunding and crowd investing. We were set up in 2013, but we have been operational since 2016 for about 5 years. We raised more than 60 million euro, financing more than 100 equity crowdfunding campaigns, so more than 100 companies, innovative startups, innovative SMEs that were growing with alternative financial instruments, which is revolutionary and disruptive. From there on, we built, since we're a part of an ecosystem, and we are honored to have all the research and technology sector in Trieste on our side, from Trieste and Friuli Venezia Giulia. We built a community of more than 60,000 members, investors, who enrolled in our platform in order to trace a sort of flow or good practice for Italian innovative startups. We were listed on the stock exchange in 2019. In Lime, after 2 years, the raising of the funds and bringing the benefits in the IPO stage to the investors who believed in us in the crowdfunding stage. Out of the 100 companies we invested in, we already have 6 exits. This is, in short, what I told you, our growth path that saw us in September 2021 go over 60 million of money raised after investments. 2019 we entered the Lime. That means that in 2020, end of 2019 and beginning of 2021, we tripled the results from 2 years ago. We are an online portal that helps to raise capital from retail investors, so not only institutions or operators from the financial field, but also citizens who want to invest their capital. Our offer is quite diversified. We talk about scale-up, startup that we have. We raised funds, PMI, SMEs, and then we inserted we are under the rules of CONSOB. We inserted raising capitals for SMEs, slightly larger SMEs, that can issue bonds, and we help them raise the capital for mini bonds, so debt instruments. And then we have a small projects for real estate. What do we do exactly? We are an online portal for raising funds. Our core activity, and this is my main activity, is that of evaluating, selecting and analyzing tens of opportunities, investment opportunities that are represented by startups and SMEs, as an instrument to raise capital. Then we analyze the characteristics in terms of market and as quality, all the elements that then are valued by the investors that do this in their professional life, funds, venture capital funds, investment companies, and so on. And then we support these companies that we select in their crowdfunding activity. That means both at administrative level, by trying to bring added value before the raising and after. Maybe if the raising happens within 2 months, thanks to the partnerships that we have established, we manage to bring value both before and after, and we try to educate companies with a constant relationship with small and big investors that will allow them to have subsequent rounds when they grow, thanks to their operations and the support of investors. In brief, this is our funnel. We receive a host of requests, about 800 a year. We publish only 6% because we try to follow an analysis that aims at selecting the most interesting companies. This is our special characteristic, the selecting path that was proven by facts. In this selection, it's very important the network that we operate in, because we have been supported by an ecosystem of incubators, accelerators, advisors, the first rank, that help us and bring interesting projects, and they help us create value and support us in raising the funds. What is the path that we follow? As you saw, our roadmap, while looking at the market of venture capital in Italy and the investments in startup and in innovation, we realized that the most interesting roadmap is that of open innovation. So we already had some success cases which saw a corporate investor within a startup that they set up with a crowdfunding campaign after a step with an institutional financer. So this is our roadmap, and this is where we're trying to move in this direction. It's the most natural roadmap for SMEs in Italy that are innovative, which find themselves in a venture capital market, which is quite different from the international one. There's a gap in the seed and early stage part and the venture capital funds. We position ourselves in this stage because the venture capital operators in Italy, they invest maybe sums which are different from an international market. They operate in the grow and maturity sector. We position ourselves in the seed and early stage part, which is the one which is less populated. That's why we believe we came up with this analysis on what are the figures of the raising of funds in venture capital in 2020. We saw a record of investments in venture capital in Italy, but the deals for early stage have diminished. This is the area or the market of interest where we can position and where we can further expand. This is an ecosystem to guarantee. It's an ecosystem wants to provide and guarantee reliability. Here we wanted to summarize and collect who are the main operators that we work with on a daily basis in order to provide, on the one hand, we have the institutions and the regulators that check our activity. We have all the technological centers, Friulia, that we collaborate with very often, and first rank partners, BioValley, that has also carried out the crowdfunding on our portal. These are our figures. The Polytechnic of Milan defines crowdfunding as a market leading for return on investment for investors who believed in its project. As you can see, the blue line is the market and the orange is the crowd-funded one. All the Italian crowdfunding, the return on investment is 150. We would be to 225 today. We have 6 exits which have been completed and 4 arriving. We have 2 takeovers, 2 listed companies, and then we have some listings which are underway and some that we cannot disclose. So now a small focus on the biotech projects, which are 10% of the total projects in raising funds on our portal. They are continually growing thanks to what happened, or because of what happened in the last 18 months. From 2016 till now, we raised capital for 12 companies in biotech, and 3 of these are made in Friuli Venezia Giulia. And then, if we are to go in depth with the figures of the sums raised in these campaigns, there has been a growth from 2019 till now. Bear in mind, 2021 is still ongoing, and there's a very important campaign on the portal that raised 160 million from more than 200 investors, which comes to prove that this sector is very interesting, not only for the venture capital environment or investments in the markets, in the main markets, but also when it comes to crowdfunding and in alternative finance, where the tech investors then go and invest. Thank you. I would give the floor immediately to Mr. Loser, who is one of the subjects that has just been quoted by Valley Investment Partners. So it's interesting to notice that finance is not only investment without connection to the stakeholders where investment is carried out. Finance creates an ecosystem, service and support. Maybe this is the operational way of BioValley, but I'm going to let Mr. Giovanni Loser to speak. Good morning, everyone. I'm Giovanni Loser, CEO of BioValley Investment Partners. I love talking about finance and innovation because this is the world I've been living in for many years. I summed up some important aspects that are trying to introduce the topic that I would like to start from. And then we'll see. There have been some objective obstacles to let finance in, especially in startup firms. Solutions that are brought forward normally are interested for startups that have extraordinary potential. So the venture capital in the Italian context objectively have some obstacles to face. Indeed, in traditional finance, and that connected to the banking, there is a certain openness to value companies according to their assets. And there's a sort of resistance from the traditional banking system to support innovation, understood in general as a patent or a prototype or something which can be connected to a potential future. And very often, patents, permits, and prototypes are not accepted by banks as a guarantee. The problem then extends because in order to get to a patent or to a prototype, funds must be allocated. So our new entrepreneurs find themselves in a difficult situation where the time and the resources are not favoring the financing of those resources. What are the solutions? I drafted this cute slide, which are with some abbreviations that I can explain briefly. First and foremost, one of the prerequisites so as that a startup or an SME can access a financing channel, it must be able to generate the wow effect. It must produce a pitch which is outstanding. When we deal about the future, we don't speak about, I have the beautiful patent which is working, but I have to convince the person on the other side to give me the money to bet on the future, because I need to show the basic principle of innovation, how I create value. The innovation is not a name on its own, but when it meets finance, it needs to demonstrate how innovation can create value. Among the various activities that I develop is that of being a coach. And I spend a lot of time, thanks to BioValley Investment Partners, to analyze a host of startups. We talk a lot about products, about business models. However, there are solutions, objective solutions, and funding sourcing. I eliminated the crowdfunding one because I excluded Ferulia because it's here and they can present it themselves. And I placed some more interesting family and friends, which seems dumb, but objectively startups raise money from this. People who are close to the entrepreneur and who fundamentally, I believe them to be quality investors for their real capacity to explain the added value of innovation. That is, normally, unless you find a coach in your family and friends, more than giving you money, they can't do anything else. And your subsequent problems won't be solved. But it does solve some initial problems. Then, the following step what I would do is to underline that another form that is connected to the value of innovation, but has a great value, is the government funds, grants, which are quite important because they award innovation in itself, and they don't necessarily need, or very often they don't need, what is the potential market value for innovation. This gives major structuring for the startup, and it's then an interesting roadmap to take. And then we start finally to talk about business, and we have the business angels, which are certainly an important stage because for the first time, the startup has to deal with people who are available to invest, are part of important, powerful networks who are present at national level, and the raising of the funds starts being connected to the explanation of the potential of innovation. But most of all, they are networks. They open the startup to the possibility, to the opportunity to find other partners. Then we move to venture capital, and if the business angel is a friendly person, the venture capital is venture friendly, and the opportunity to have some negotiation here is quite low. From my experience in the United States, normally with venture capital, maybe we're going to have experiences from the others. They see 2,000 or 3,000 companies a year. They choose maybe 2, and in the end they invest in 1. This is the type of work that you have to face. Venture capital then introduces a bit of a stress for the innovative startup that could potentially bring home some money. From that moment, 50 or 60% of the entrepreneur's time is to manage the venture capital and not do what he is supposed to do. But since this is a step forward, it must be mentioned. An industrial group that invests is Valley Group. We are a company that has a dialogue with entrepreneurs who has a track record for investment, which is quite interesting. We have more than 15 companies where our majority stakeholders. We coach, we handle governance, networking. We participate and we are concentrated in a very rich ecosystem with a limited concept of distance. So we can be an alternative for easy finance. We finance our partners, for example, to offer stability and continuity to companies. Then I would introduce as a last solution in the something that is truly interesting, alternative peers. In Italy, we have the peers. Which have reached a value of asset management of almost 20 billion euro. And they have been the fundamental funnel for a segment in the stock exchange, which is the Lime one. Interestingly, last year, alternative peers were introduced, which basically extended even further their firepower, because they can raise, investors can invest on their own, not up till 30,000 euros, but 300,000 euros. These peers can invest in the listed and non-listed companies, and hence there is a new market of 20 billion euro of assets and management. So we talk about liquidity, which can arrive in innovative SMEs. In the first 8 months of the year, from the 19 listed companies, 7 of these were innovative SMEs. We have Ulisemed, one of these. You were talking to us earlier about Rocket Science. It's a company that we know quite well, that in 2020, with a turnover that didn't reach 300,000 euros, now it is listed with 39 million euros now. Thanks in part to a contract with Menarini. So 39 million listed in the stock exchange nowadays. So there is liquidity. Ulisemed produced or came up with a pitch with a wow event, was outstanding, because they sold a platform for diagnostic tests, which was amazing. So simple elements. We have the funnels, interesting ones. We need to have capacity, follow a certain growth path and roadmap, and this way finance can help you fulfill your dreams as a startup or a PME or SME. Due to time constraints, we start with Roberto della Marina. We see that there is liquidity, but we need more ingredients: the human capital, a business capital with a wow effect, and maybe another element that could satisfy the expectations of venture capitalists. Let's see if we can get started. Today's presentation is sort of a grill of a business model, anti-conventional one, that we tried to design when we raised this fund. I manage a 40 million fund with a limited partner, Cassa Depositi, Fondo Investimenti, to do tech transfer specifically. What is called tech transfer by universities and institutions in Italy towards the market. We know that Italy has excellent quality and quantity of research, but there is a cultural gap that blocks the transfer towards innovation, that is creating positive feedback in the system. We tried to look at the classical financial system differently in a venture capital by changing several items, and I will show you how. We're going to concentrate on deep tech, some of those technologies which are out there that come from research results from hard sciences, physics, chemistry, mathematics, engineering, biology, and medicine, which could have a strong impact on the lives, a strong social impact. And it's seen as the fourth wave from the Fourth Revolution. We're going to go beyond the unicorn culture, and we're going to work on a B2B industrial aspect. And we saw in China, we're going to go inside the rooting of value created by the company and not stay in the at a superficial level where we don't know the effects for the future. The deep tech, where biotech is an important part, has always been characterized by a convergence of approaches and technology. A technology in deep tech means a mix of design engineering that can harmonize the results of science and a convergence of sciences and different technologies. You can understand very well from this that these circles are intersected. We see that here we speak about biology quite often, great innovative projects that can have an impact on the life of people that can translate itself into value. Thank you. COVID. I'm going to talk about indices. This is a historical development of biotech indices. You can see the dip in March. It lasted for 2 months. We had a complete recovery in 2 months. You see that it increased twofold. China doubled compared to the beginning of 2020. Europe has a 22% increase. This is even greater because this is the figure. These are the figures in May. There was a dip in the US due to elections. This is a bull market. We are hopeful for the future. As my speaker beforehand said, it was a fantastic year, both from the point of view of funding and also from the point of view of total deal, which was carried out with venture finance and an important increase of listed companies. Certainly, this is an aspect that underlined the importance of going back on working on practical industrial aspects. And we are aware of this. If we go to Europe has moved forward. We are managing to cover a gap that has always characterized us compared to available capital elsewhere. And if I may say so, the availability, willingness to risk capital. The gap is still 5 times compared to the United States, but as you can see, the growth trend permeates all levels. Why? Because science is good. Almost half of the best universities in the world that operate in life sciences are situated in Europe. On your right, you can see that Europe is a leader on the quantity and quality of research published, which then bring forward discoveries, not necessarily innovation, but these are the seeds that can then lead to a company project and then an effect in the industry for Europe or the country. If we look at biotech, has grown similarly to the United States. If you can see on the left, there's a factor of 5 difference. If we can look at the profit of the investments in Europe, United States, and China, between the early stage and late stage, we can see that the late stage, we use capital better. It has greater profitability. It has a better yield. China needs further analysis, in my opinion, but the information that I'm trying to convey is that we are culturally closer to the United States. So it's an easier way to compare. In the early stage, there is a gap here, which I believe to be a cultural one, more than economic, in terms of scientific results, which see a uniformity of investments in development classes in companies that are venture-baked. You can see here that in the late stage, we are aligned with the United States, but the lower we go, the risk is higher, the more we enter in fierce development of a product or service, the more the problem is bigger. The bigger the problem. But if we look at a listed company in biotech in Europe and the United States, it raises 4 times more funds. When we compare again, we see the same capital. What does this tell us? The fact that the stock exchange in Europe is fragmented, and we don't like risks more than the United States. So one interesting recommendation, I go back to the culture of investment, of development in science and technology, is that we need to work more at the beginning, when development starts, when we start creating value. You see, there has been growth. For early stage funding in biotech has increased by 13% because we are now at 6 billion in Europe. But in order to fill the gap with the US and China, going beyond the absolute values, we do not work on tech transfer office to generate and inception of innovation. It's there where we have to work more. It's what we said 5 years ago from this McKinsey report that was published some months ago. Very interesting innovation hotspot to drive the next act in Europe. These are the McKinsey recommendation to biotech companies and policymakers. Beyond the mere recommendations, which are very interesting, go global, fly high, build capabilities. On the policymakers' side, try to establish industrial platforms, try to work to strengthen TTOs with people, networks, and competence. Try to create agreements that can be established between the public sector and the private sector so that you can organically grow initiatives at company level. Interestingly, in 2017, when we started raising funds from the EBTH platform, we raised 40 million with a business model which was wasn't very conventional at the time. We start from proof of concept till go to market. we carried out 10 investments at proof of concept within academia. So 4 or 5 million there, which manages to fill the gap that Giovanni showed, that my colleague from the crowd underlined. We have a problem as a venture capital and a risk sector. That of available capital. If we work in deep tech, not only in biotech, but by widening the scope, we need to work on 5 sectors, not only finance and researchers, money and minds, the fuel and the shuttle. We need management. We helped our subsidiaries with managers who have been working for 20 years, using them as temporary managers. So they help instruct, train, and that's it. They help mentor, and they give the kickoff to be able to grow. We need an infrastructure to help a launch, to work with the corporate, that are objectives for the exit, identify a market and how to get there, and all the infrastructure that would allow us to work and have rapid prototyping. 2 minutes before I conclude, this is we have 24 panels in Italy. We have 2,000 deals, 20 investment companies. We invested 25 million, but we closed the fund at the moment. We are raising funds for the second, and in line with what McKinsey declared, we need to create an ecosystem to accelerate and give culture to entrepreneurs and the means to grow. Professor Tracogna mentioned at the beginning, at the introduction, we had a partnership with MIB by co-designing an executive master's as a part of financing to proof of concepts and our portfolio to educate them for entrepreneurship and the company culture, in order to have a sort of dialogue with professionals in the sector, so as not to risk finding ourselves too far lagging behind. Last element, because this is interesting for us as a region, we have a partnership with the appuntamento company, or Confindustria Pordenone joint venture, where we use this plant with various production lines as a test bed to try young technologies, integrating them in a true industrial system. Because producing parts needs to work, for example, in the fridge sector, and we test in a real-life environment the results of our startups. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Roberto della Marina. I saw that you are doing 88,000 kilometers per year with your sales reps. I will start now with Giorgio Costa Curda, who speaks on behalf of Business Angels. Can the studio confirm that the speaker is connected? No, he's not connected. We'll see if he can join us later. Then I will give the floor to Stefano Puissa from TMB Associati, who will tell us about other ways to help these company projects and the companies themselves to carry out innovation with financing forms which are different from those that we've seen before. Thank you everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. I will use the 10 minutes I have in order to talk about the practical scenarios that are coming to the fore in the facilitated finance that have been mentioned by my previous speakers. This period will be very favorable from this point for two reasons. First and foremost, because we are in a renewing period. It would have been favorable even beyond what happened in the past, in the recent times with the pandemic. And what was the natural evolution of financing for companies, including startups, will be added. Some extraordinary funds will be added with the objective of relaunching this current situation. I will talk to you about the instruments that will be available at the end of October, the reopening on behalf of Siemens of all internalization instruments that will use the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience also. Vice versa, all regions are working on indirect funds that are made available by Europe and managed by each region. Friuli Venezia Giulia is one of the leaders. We already have the first calls that will come up at the beginning of 2022 or the end of the year, and will concentrate on research and development. That can be an opportunity, an outstanding opportunity, because in order to participate, all you need to have is innovation. No involvement of the business aspects that will arrive later. Let's not forget the Industry 4.0 and all the tax incentives in Transition 4.0. These aspects can add to the others, and you can go to industry, you can finance all the results that have been reached previously. One must not you must take into consideration the innovative SMEs and the startups in the Chamber of Commerce that have been used in a very limited manner, because they are used mostly in order to access some government guarantees. But the fact that you are registered with them means that you can get work some equity instruments, for example, but also allow your investors to have some fiscal facilities. And then smaller companies from the Chamber of Commerce that are to finance the digital aspect, to then greater programs that are the trans-border programs that require collaboration with more European countries and effects in the area. So a greater impact compared to one company. I'm arriving at the end of my list. Horizon Europe for innovative, disruptive companies with the collaboration of research institutions or universities can access directly European funds. And then the end of the list, which is the PNRR, the Recovery and Resilience National Plan, but the guidelines are still being defined, so we don't know how they will impact. I will start with a list of opportunity to see what we can do to be ready and access all of these instruments. Because nowadays, subsidized finance, and one of the requisites to access it, is probably having good managing within the company and within the startup, which was not requested up until a few years ago. The Recovery and Resilience Plan will have some dedicated funds, and there will be indirect consequences of financing, and companies might access indirectly to these funds by participating in creating value through these investments. Practical example, in the previous plan with BioValley Group, thanks to the knowledge and coordination by a group of companies, we were able to participate in a call issued by the Cagliari Hospital to develop a specific topic, a specific issue, and this call was designed by the Cagliari Hospital as a beneficiary, as a European partner in and they had to look for specific partners. So we are sort of expecting that capacity to monitor the needs of the main beneficiary will allow companies to access funds, more funds than the direct ones. I'm going to conclude. What are we working on now? Because we don't know what the opportunities will look like. We are working on the managing of these companies, because the final prerequisite is to find innovation potential, how we can define our being innovative, how, and not only in a self-referential way, but by referring to research development, and we need to refer to Frascati and also we are classified there because we verified a framework that is potentially objective. We need to be compliant and manage tangibles in the administrative documentary part. Very simple example, we need to advertise in the budget, in subsidized finance, and we have the first callbacks of the funds that have been allocated because a part of the balance sheet was not prepared accordingly. This is managed in a non-accounting way. Another important aspect is the development pipeline. I'm talking about standalone innovation, or I want to develop something and an exit way for the future. The subsidizing that was mentioned a lot to help these, we do not expect it to see it again. In order to finance projects with projects that have good plans ahead of them. Then the project management aspect. I allocate money because you have a great idea, but how are you going to manage it? What is your capacity to manage projects, to keep them under check? It's a management and organizational aspect here. And then the accounting. Some funds, in order to access subsidized finance, you need to have a good analytical accounting for the finance project. This is a terror for many public institutions, not only companies, that need to review their management control system. Networking, technical and scientific control with those who can offer managing abilities, because the request is that of reaching a performance level that each company may not be able to reach alone, and here the network might prove fundamental. Digitalization and interconnection. Innovative companies are a step forward, but often we forget that many companies still need to face. The medium-sized ones have management control systems which don't function very well, and they are separated and not interconnected, which don't allow them to reach their objective. Last aspect, human resources. Especially for important programs, management is assessed and the ability to increase resources within the company to manage the funds that are allocated. This was the evolution and the transformation that we had to see within our company, where we were concentrated on the concept of call and subsidized finance. Now we need to offer support for a facilitated integrated system, which sometimes is standalone, sometimes is aggregator, sometimes directly, and sometimes becoming providers for a bigger reality. To offer you an idea, in 2005, in order to find the same result with one instrument, we need to use 5 or 6. We have to work in an integrated manner without accumulation of functions. The complexity of the system goes towards a management issue rather than an innovation issue. Thank you for this perspective. How to access funds that are quite attractive and interesting, but they are quite tricky because they need to comply with regulations at European and national levels. I would give the floor to Francesco Cerruti, General Manager, VC Hub, Italy. We can't hear you. Maybe it's a problem with... We can hear you. Thank you, and I feel a little bit envious because I can see you're physically there, in present. I can't be there, unfortunately. Thank you to the many stakeholders who contributed to organizing this event, which has become central in the development of sciences in our country. I am thinking about last year when we were working remotely. Okay, we are remotely this year too. And many of you can be there to enjoy this conference in presence, managing to enjoy the beauty of Trieste and creating stronger relations It's thanks to the research of Moderna and biotech, which were the leaders in the fight against COVID. Why do I speak about that? Stefano said that we watch startups as a sort of a fad for young people who can afford them. But as it was shown in the past 8 months, it has to be considered as engines for growth, not only economic but also social growth. I'm going to talk about C Hub Italy, the VC Hub Italy, which is an example in the innovative ecosystem in Italy. There we have Italian members that talked before my name. We were set up 2 years ago to represent the interest of Italian venture capitalists. Then we realized that there was a gap in Italy and the need to have a stakeholder which could be the spokesperson for the interests by suggesting a series of measures in order to facilitate those who invest, but also who work in innovation, in order to put into practice our best intentions and increase investments. The figures in 2020 demonstrate that the life sciences sectors, which is excellent in Italy, we know this very full well, was an engine for the Italian innovative system, which you may well know is still far from other ecosystems in other countries which have similar economies to Italy. In 2020, the sector with the greatest number of operations was the second one after fintech, with a total investments in startups among the highest, more than 100 million, for 20% of the total that the Italian startups have managed to raise. Roberto della Marina spoke earlier about his fund in 2017. In 2015, there were no methods specifically dedicated to investments in companies which were active in biotech. There has been a long evolution since then, and we are happy to say that many things have changed. I'm thinking about Sofinova Fund, but without going too far back in this Panacas, launch a second vehicle, 150 million, Claris, which is another one, 85 million dedicated specifically to startups and SMEs in life sciences, and other big players in investment and in innovation are thinking about starting investing in this life sciences sector. We hope that in the next months and years we can have another leapfrog jump in order to increase the sector, which is doing very well, but it's still far, probably for historical and attitude reasons, rather than the capacity of great players to access the field. The next months will be decisive, and for 2 reasons. The implementation of the National Plan for Recovery and Resilience, which is something we are all looking forward to. In the past months, we looked at reaching, first and foremost, the European funds, and then designing the plan as 2 different things. But I believe there are 2 starting points. The hard work will start now, when the funds will be allocated, and we need to assess how the plan needs to be implemented. I consider it very important. I clearly, from the potential till implementation, many things can happen. Consequently, our efforts, and I believe the efforts of all the ecosystem, must be concentrated on the implementation of the important measures that are included in the plan and that can help the life sciences sector and the innovative companies in Italy. Another topic is a topic that differentiates us from the other countries in the European Union, the 27 countries, because there's a Swedish similarity here. It's what Stefano said earlier, the tech transfer, that is communicating among universities, institutions, research institutions, and public and private entities. In Italy, we need to start thinking about a career in universities and industry. This doesn't happen in other countries, and we hope that institutions can use the indications that we offered in the work table that we dedicated to tech transfer, and that had as a result a suggestion, a Tech Transfer Act, as we defined it, to suggest some small steps towards rendering this mechanism more easier and more fluid in Italy. I was thinking about the moment we met a year ago. I think everything will go well in Italy. I think that next year Italy will be even more important in the life sciences sector, because in May, many of you might know, Milan, for the first time in the history of our country, will host BioEquity, the greatest conference for investors in this field. What will be another chance to show the rest of Europe and the world how competitive, professional, and able to work at global level we are. I will conclude with a small joke. 2021 was the year of sports for Italy, and given the successes we had, 2022 can be the year for innovation and life science in Italy. Thank you all for your invitation, and I hope that I will be able to see you soon in person. Thank you for your wishes. I would now give the floor and the invitation to close the session to Roberta Terpin, Senior Investment Officer, Friulia. Can I have the slides, please? Thank you. Since we are slightly late, I won't present Friulia because I think the slides will be shared, and I will just recap what was said so far, which is also included in my presentation. Friulia is a core business in private equity. We are a general fund, and thus we don't specify, or we don't work specifically on life sciences. But in 2020 we had an exceptional year for all venture capitalists, for all private equity. We had 40 million in investments. We invested in innovative SMEs and in innovative startups. It wasn't our core business, so it was something exceptional for us. These are the various types of needs that we respond to. The last one, which is certainly important, very important for this meeting, is the startup section. Friulia, as many have said so far, it's very risky to invest in the early startup. We are an investment institution at regional level, and we had to find a way to facilitate the risk, and we did it through FRIE. which is issued not specifically to us, but to all investors that invest in the innovative startups. We can ask for this guarantee from FRIE FRIE guarantees 70% of the investment. What happened in 2020? We already mentioned. We had a crisis, crash in the GDP, and here in the region, not so much. I will focus more on the topic of the regional economic context because we are an institution here in the region. Why the crash wasn't so tough here in the region? Because we are a manufacturing hub here, and because we export a lot. The effect there was quite an impact on companies due to the fact that the region has an important tourist sector. Notwithstanding the GDP dip, the companies didn't close down. That is important to remember because there have been national measures that blocked companies from defaulting. So at the end of 2020, we were in sort of a suspending status. We didn't know what would happen in 2021. We actually had a very important recovery of the sector at regional level. As Friuli, we continued investing in innovative startups. What we did in the first half of 2021 was 2 strategic operations. One, a partner, one of our subsidiaries, which is the BioValley Investment Partners. We sold, in a perspective of development and consolidation, we sold them the incubators because we are a general investor. For us, it's very difficult to enter or exit in a single research project and understand if it is worthwhile for the market. So this is what we decided to do at the strategic level, is to count on various investors, those that Giovanni Loser mentioned, and BioValley is one of them amongst others. We sold 100% of B, but we are partners with BioValley, and this allows us to have a full understanding of the sector and check that investments are carried out according to the guidelines of the region. Here I would like to focus on the Recovery and Resilience National Plan, very important one. We have the regional guidelines that mention the smart health sector, not only the last point that talks about the development of smart health in the region, which means that certainly we're going to have an injection of liquidity in this sector that will allow various innovative companies in the sector to develop. But there will also be a focus on the digitalization of these companies and sustainability. I will recap now the ESG topic that we also in this plan. We saw a lot of positivity for the future so far, but we need to be careful, because companies that operate in BioHighTech and healthcare, currently there are some situations that may lead to risks and hence instability in the present and the future. An important increase in the cost of goods, transport and energy, difficulty of transportation. There's a lack of raw materials. And this can also impact the BioHighTech. There's a change in the competition paradigm, change of diplomatic alliances, and a change in Europe and all the world, changes in fiscal and monetary policy. This means that if today we see a growth for the next 2 years, certainly we will see that the sector was growing in the past, was growing in 2020. Notwithstanding this, there are some aspects that indicate possible important changes in markets. So what we suggest is to analyze the above-mentioned aspects. Do not pretend they don't exist, that everything will vanish in 12 months. Maybe the cost of energy will go back to normal, but the shortage of raw materials may last for many years. So we need to talk about new raw materials or new materials. Careful about competition. We have been mentioning this for years, working together, collaboration among startups. Startups need to work with big companies. So we need to pay attention to many aspects in order to avoid living in a completely different world in a year from now. So what I recommend to all companies, don't rest on your laurels, but bring forward analysis of what will the future be like so that you are ready for it when the new world arrives. This is our suggestion. 2 comments on the pitch that Giovanni said, the wow effect. Very interesting, because it allows for a first contact with investing companies, but it's not enough, because you need to go into further detail. Another important element, we talked about equity today, not debt. We talk little of debt, very little. But if a company needs to develop, it has to do so with the equity support, family and friends, private equity, whatever. What is important is that new entrepreneurs know you can't set up a company just by accumulating debt. This is my final comment. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, speakers. Thank you for the invitation to this session. I think we were quite punctual. We can now have a coffee break for a bit of networking, which is one of the purposes of these events, especially when we are finally in presence. We're going to stop here. The event carries on. We finished this plenary session, but the conference goes on. Have a wonderful day.